Hello and welcome back to another Rules of the Realm on Spiral Up. We've got Howdy with us again. What are we on? I think we're on part 8 now, something like that. Week 8 of this of our chats. We're sort of delving in to try and find out, are there rules to the realm? You know, how do we control this reality? How do we control our experience, or at least have more input to, you know, what we experience maybe? So welcome back, Howdy.
Thanks. We're kind of keep moving on, and for everyone out there knows, we're working on a secondary side project from this that we hope will be something useful for you as well.
Yeah,
We'll
exactly.
let you know maybe in a month or two when we've closer on that front.
Yeah, we definitely want this to go somewhere and, you know, sort of turn it into something and get out there. So we'll keep you updated. And yeah, so today I just wanted to start actually with some notes. I mean, wow, right? What have I written down here? If I can find them. I've written down, so I mean, we've touched on it before, like the whole being sporadic and unexpected and not repeating, you know, experiences, and what we're doing seems to be a way to at least, I don't know, fool the matrix or stun the matrix. You know, that's what it seems like. You were talking about, you know, when someone went to shake hands and you sort of reacted differently and they literally froze, you know, you said, like they almost shut down for 5 seconds, like, what do I do? What do I do? And I've been listening to Jason on Archaics. We just had to talk about him for listen to some of his stuff. But I heard one bit where he was talking about the simulation, and what he was saying basically is, if you look at the matrix, you know, as a huge computer, right, that it's got to process all these experiences for 7+ billion people, or however many beings are down here. And so the best way to do it, you know, power wise, is to make everyone have the same experience, right? Or to get people just to keep repeating the same experience over and over again, because then it can get them into an algorithm and it can run them on, you know, less power. And so it's when we do things differently, like not shaking hands or acting sporadically, or however you want to call it, that we tend to get a reaction from the matrix. You know, if we do it at once, we tend to get an easier life. You know, you got to pay your bills and all that, but you know, it doesn't tend to come after you, right, the matrix. But as soon as you step out, it's got to use more power, because it's you know, because you're now out of its sort of program. But what he also sort of said is, that's the time when you can create things, because at that point it has to create a unique experience for you, because you've stepped outside the program. So what do you think about that as a way of...
Yeah, that's an interesting layer, isn't it?
Mm.
This idea that, and it makes sense, if you're a program, the more everything runs to a simplistic program, you don't have to go into the edges of your stuff. It runs from the box. So, because when I was talking about it, I was talking about this idea of becoming unexpected to the world and the world becoming unexpected to you. But this is also, that's an interesting comment that he just made. So that by us being unexpected, the matrix itself has to respond to us by giving us more attention, because we've run out of the I guess the record groove a little bit, and it has to respond to it. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, isn't it? It also reminded me of when we talked about the movie Mandela Effect, and that's sort of what it was about. Is this guy had a different experience, and the Matrix was trying to alter. It was trying to craft an experience that matched his memories, but it couldn't, and so it reset itself. It just reset the board and went starting again. And it gave him a reality that he could then live with. And in that movie, it was almost like that was more important to get that right than to leave everyone else, you know, who was just going through the motions. Because in the end, it reset everything for one person to get his experience and his memories and that to line up, which is another interesting point. Like, so in that point, if it's AI and it wants to learn, is it more important? Is that why we get more attention almost as well, that it wants to learn new experiences? So it kind of hodls everyone in, and because it knows there's so many that aren't going to do much. And then when we do something different, it's like, oh, because it wants to learn.
I'm not sure about that, because I think if it was an AI wanting experiences, you would do as much as you could to stop the robotic behavior. You wouldn't want the behavior. It would, maybe you'd say that that'll start to happen, but you would try to throw things as much as possible to shake it up. And at least the system we've known. Now, it doesn't mean it's the way the AI is set up, but at least the way the AI is run in our life, it seems to want to make things as homogeneous and repetitive as possible.
Yeah.
So my guess would be that the first thing you talked about, this idea of we want it repetitive to to save power, to save simplicity, makes sense. Same as this idea of, if it's a simulation, you want to program into the future, not into the past, because it's too much work. So you'll look into the past and not be able to get a lot of detailed information because it's literally not there. It wasn't programmed into the past. It's just a simple template. But if you look in the present and the future, you're going to get a ton of information that also kind of ties in. It makes sense to sort of figure out the overlay of the program we're under.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point that we haven't really broached, is the theory is that if this is a simulation, then the creator would put a lot more effort into creating the now and the current experience than creating the past, right? And so that's why when we look into history, a lot of it doesn't make sense. Is this sort of more proof? So yeah,
and that could be, again, one of the things that's been, because we watch so many videos. I was just talking about another one, a really good channel that I bumped into recently that's doing some good videos. But what's interesting is they in the middle of them somewhere, they're presenting the truth. They've figured out the answer, and they are now telling us the way it is. You can't know. That's the problem. We can't really know 400 years ago, 800 years ago, 1200 years ago. And maybe the point is we can't because it's not real. Maybe the whole point of it is it's literally this nebulous idea that's been put in there, but it has no tangibility. So it doesn't matter how long we look at it, we're never going to find anything like actual objective, other than maybe that's as much as we can get out of it. It's a program past of probably some other world, and it didn't really happen in our realm. It's just a backstory for us as characters to. So it also makes this delve into the past really, really tricky.
It does. I know. It's one of those things. It's the more you get into it, the more you sort of start to realize that it might be, useless, right? Not worth that much, because as you start to study the past, you realize that it's not as real as we think it is. And then, if it's not real, then what's the point in studying it? It's just one of those catch-22s, isn't it? But, as we do look into it, though,
or at least to a certain depth, right? There's a level.
Yeah,
I think there's a level to study it. I mean, I think you have to study it in order to start seeing that. If you ignore the study of history completely, then you're bound by the narrative.
Yeah.
It comes to this idea of, but shouldn't at some point you start to see, if it's this full of holes, one, it's obviously a giant lie. And then the next step is, can you really know the truth? Can you really know what happened at the Battle of Waterloo if you can't go there and see it and experience it yourself? So it's this real dichotomy of how far do you go in the study?
Yeah. Even if we find a library and it says, here's the shelf, here's the written history, or here's whatever, here's the full story, we still can't prove it that it is. So this is the thing. Everything, it's all subjective in the end. But I think it's like you said, there's definitely lessons there, but but there's the rabbit holes are probably not worth diving down a lot of the time, because that's what they are, right? They're just holes. But we sort of need to understand from the past that, I mean, it tells us that the present isn't what we think. It's the biggest marker almost, isn't it, that where we are now is not what we believe it is, that it's it's an illusion of some kind. It's a whatever, a program, a matrix, a simulation. And so so this is the thing. If it is a simulation, which it seems to be, what are the rules? How do we get it to react, and how do we get it to react in a positive way? So if we're acting differently, I mean, I suppose, do we get different reactions, I guess? Because obviously when people, do, well, actually, that's not, you can't even say that. I was going to say, when people act out and do bad things, right, and cause tragedies and that, they tend to have bad things happen back to them. But you can't even really say that, can you? Because most of those people sit up in offices in suits and ties and never get touched. So, I mean, but we definitely seem to get a reaction, don't we? Because everyone asking questions, like we all get, we all get more issues with life than normal people who just sort of pay their bill. And we wonder, how do they do that? How do they go to work and wake up every morning and go to their job and go shopping and cook dinner and be really happy with it and be happy to do that for 20 years? And if that's true, then what are we, right? Are we an anomaly? Like, because that shouldn't be part of the program, should it? It's like you said, if it's to do with saving power and we're part of the program, then we would be created to save power. So we've got to be an anomaly of some kind in here, which is the next question, I guess, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, this idea, I guess, I mean, we would be classified as philosophical thinkers, right? People who, for some reason of the course of our lives, began to ask very different questions of the world we experience than the average person. So like we say, the average person is, first of all, so swamped with daily chores, especially, someone who's got 2 or 3 kids and they're running them here, running them there, trying to keep their own jobs going, trying to keep their house clean, trying to, there isn't actual time. Even if they wanted to, where could they find 30 minutes to an hour to put in their day to think? So also somewhere in the course of lives, like people like you and I, we somehow also created space. Somehow we must have gone through these down periods where to the outside world, we're not doing very much. Kind of like, he's being a bit lazy now, or how come he's not doing this? How come he's not achieving that? But the philosophical minded person starts to take other things as being important. Is that so are we an anomaly to the system, or are we, because they would think we must be, in a sense, also programmed into it. There must be this kind of program where the beings inside it contemplate their existence. It's just, it really takes a lot of factors to come together for anyone to start doing it.
So, I mean, that's the thing. Is it more like a program that we're part of, or is it like a video game and we've inserted ourselves into the program to experience it? But obviously we're still in a program, right, with parameters and all these types of things. That's the question, isn't it? Really, is it we're part of it, or are we the creators of it? I guess, because that's what we'd have to be if we're not part of it.
Are we still?
Are we prisoners?
Yeah.
Cyber prison.
Are we still touching an element that's outside the game? You know what I mean? Like the barrier wall. Maybe for some reason we were still a bit connected to it, to this outside source. And it seems like generally tragedy and difficulty is going to more likely want to connect you to this original source than happy, joyous experiences. Generally, I mean, is the mystical experience which is a lot of the people watching this video will have had them, and it's a beautiful experience. It's a wonderful thing. We feel tremendous in it, but then it goes away, and how much did we really gain from it? It's transformative, but compared to when some tragedy is struck, and if you really dig into yourself and ask them, why is the world like this? What's going on? How can this happen like this? How can the world be constructed like this? It's a totally different mindset then that really pushes you into what this philosophical mindset might be. So maybe tragedy is something that's hardwired, suffering is hardwired into the system, maybe partially as an energy sucking to the system, but as also sort of not a patch, what's the word I'm looking for? A secondary switch that can also trigger a few of us to ask questions we don't normally ask.
So it's like a fail safe almost to keep the system running or to keep us growing. And I guess that's the question, isn't it? Is like, what is this place? Is it here?
Yeah.
Are we trapped in here, or are we here for our own experience to grow? Like, is this, matrix, if we want to call it, is it created to just give us a realm, a place to experience different things, like maybe like tragedy, right? And these different types of things, and that way, then you would think that the program would be learning off us and would want to sort of learn and tailor experiences, and maybe, so this is the whole thing, and we've discussed it again, is why do we forget? If that's true, then why would we come in here and forget? And it might be so that we can, experience a life, I don't know, without any preconceived sort of, beliefs or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's gosh, we've suddenly hit the hard questions again, haven't we? You would think, but is that what the fail safe is? Like, so if we say, well, we decided to come in here, we decided we wouldn't remember anything, that way we can be anything, and we will believe it wholeheartedly, right? We won't have these preconceived, like, I'm just playing a character beliefs. We'll actually experience it. Then, so this isn't going to make sense either, because then if that's true, and if we stop doing things, if we get wake up calls, like, hey, you need to, you're supposed to be in here to learn, right? So you get tragedy and things happening, but that doesn't happen to the most people. So again, it's like, or are they just NPCs and there's only a few of us in here? I mean, that would almost make more sense, right? The whole background people sort of theory and NPCs, that they're just there to fill out the background. But
here's a switch. Here's a switch to that whole concept you just said. It comes from the novel Replay by Ken Grimwood. It's the original Groundhog Day. It's a person who's living his life over, not a day, but his life over and over and over again. And in the course of one of the relives of his life with another person who had been also reliving his life over, that they had connected with, he came back and yet started to wonder, like, during the most of the novel, he's thinking, I'm advanced. I'm one who understands this. I'm one. So what about all these other people then? If they don't see the replaying nature of reality, are they just, non-player characters? Are they zombies? Are they here just to populate? And then he thought, because the other character that he knew seemingly didn't come back, she was still in her non-player character form when he ran into her the next time in one of these replays. And he started wondering, well, wait a minute, maybe it's got it backwards. Maybe she figured it out in the last lifetime. So consciousness left. I'm like one of the last dummies. I'm not getting it. The reason they're non-player characters is because they are, but not because they haven't got it. It's because they already got it in some other millionth run of this life, and we're the last ones to be figuring this out. So it's a switch when you take that to your own egoic thing. I'm advanced. The other people are, they're zombies. They're not getting it. Well, we're the last ones to get it.
Yeah.
These other ones figured it out. 10 lifetimes ago.
Exactly. I have actually had, yeah, I've had that thought as far as, if we talk about history and, I've talked about different, energy. So like Tartaria literally could be on a different frequency, but still functioning, the old world, what we call Tartaria. And the people who didn't believe the programming, they're seeing that and they're living it. And we're the ones who kind of believed that none of it worked and it was all crap. And now we're just starting to work out that we were wrong. So I know, right? Wow, I've never heard it put like that. I mean, gosh. We really are like the very last trickle, if that's true, isn't it? And is that
Of course,
what is that
if
what
you
is?
take it into like some sort of Eastern philosophy, like Buddhist or some sort of Tibetan idea, which is enlightenment isn't an individual thing. Enlightenment has to be an all or nothing deal. Everything enlightens or nothing enlightens. As long as something in this reality is unenlightened, then you can't be. So it's part of this bodhisattva idea, right? Where you are almost in a sense giving up your own life in order to try to help other creatures, because the realization, if one creature is not awake, then nobody's awake. Because if there's only one thing having a dream, anything that's still asleep in the dream means it's still asleep back here. So it's also a really interesting concept that the work we do, it doesn't matter how many are, how many aren't, or whatever, we are still one piece of this giant whole that still doesn't fully know everything, that's the totality of everything. So it's in our best interest to have as much truth as possible. If this idea is it's an all or nothing thing, so why not do our part of the job so we don't the oneness doesn't have to focus on us the next time.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, and this is obviously all based on living the same, like as the same person, which is over and over again, right? That's what the lifetime, that like the book from Ken he was the same character, right? The same person, like reliving the same experiences, and then and that would make sense if we're down here to sort of learn, right? Because you get reruns. If you get it wrong, then you get to re-examine it, try something else. And I mean, how many movies are like that, right? Reruns and do-overs and everything. So yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? So
he remembers all of his lives. That's the difference. He remembers
and
them.
he remembers, yeah. So yeah, so he comes back so he
We
can
don't.
learn and get better each lifetime, and so evolve, and reach enlightenment or whatever it is.
Well, no, he doesn't. That's the other part of the book. He doesn't evolve. Things don't get better. This is a really important part of the book, is that each time he lives a life, he changes. Of course, he tries to become more. One time he tries to become rich, another time he tries to become this, and he has these experiences. But then, of course, he dies again. He goes back. He's 20 years old, and he realizes, well, I'm back in the same world, and all that I did in the other life has seemingly just been washed away. I'm back to the exact same point. Why would I now do this same thing over again? So he's back. He literally, it's bizarre. He starts coming to the end of the book wondering, what was the point of doing any of it? Because literally once I died, it was like it got erased.
Yeah.
So it's like changes completely the outlook of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's sort of like he begins to rather sink into his experiences by the end of it, to just be in the experience and not worry so much what the experience is going to be or what he's going to get from it, or it's just the experience is good enough.
No, yeah, I was going to ask if he sort of what the answer there was. And so yeah, right. So it's rather than trying to change, I guess, the simulation, it's to learning to go with the flow. Like, so do you want to give away the ending? Did he did that stuff in being reborn, or now I'm wondering when he realized that, or did it just end? You don't know. He's still living his life somewhere.
I don't know. The book had such an impact on me because when I had my experience in the canyon, when I had my death experience and came out with the realization of the unreality of reality itself, it was a book that I had been waiting for on an interlibrary loan. And literally, I had my experience on the Saturday, and Monday morning when I got up, there was a message on my machine from the library. The book is in. So I went, and it was the first book I read after my experience. And it was like a message telling me, this is the world. You have lived your life a million times or 10,000 times or whatever, but unlike the character in the book, you don't remember it. Or as I began to go through, because I talked about this, my experiences where I think I bumped into parallel lives, and I've died in other, seen deaths in other times that I've lived, or known professions and different careers I had, different people I was married to, and then saw how I interacted with them in this life, how things were either odd or seemingly smooth for no unknown reason. So the book touched me in a way that kind of said, if we're looking for a rule of the realm, I might say that's it. We're not just having a one and out experience as us, as the character I think of as Howdy, as the character you think of as Cambell.
Mm.
We're having at least multiple runs of this thing, which would make sense if a creator not so much is trying to get us to learn and grow, but if a creator wants experiences, if they're looking for various experiences, then if you just give us one life, our experiences are limited. If you give us 10,000 lives, then all you got to do is branch off a couple of little areas of our life, and our whole rest of our life will be completely different experiences. To me, that would make sense as
Yeah.
a program.
Yeah.
Run
Yeah.
the program 10,000 times, and you'll get 10,000 different runs of experiences.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, much easier, much less computing power than, creating new, completing new worlds, times, experiences, everything, characters every time. I mean, yeah, right. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, right, that might, yeah, that kind of, I mean, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, obviously that there's a thought that, or, a theory out there that that's what this is, right? We're all one, we're all God, if you want to call it that, and we're just, God experiencing itself, right? Because if there's only one, it can't experience anything, it has to splinter off, create different things to actually get experiences, which, kind of makes sense, kind of feels right. So, I mean, in that sense, then I mean, I guess that means that the realm is made for experience. So, if we go back to, doing things differently and it having to expend more power on us, like, do we think that's to create new experiences for us, or do we think that that's just something in the computer that it has to do? Because this it does seem that that's where people create, well, they definitely is where they create new experiences, but it seems to be where a lot of people create what they want. You've got to, we know, right? You have to do something different to get whatever success or whatever. Normally you've got to step outside the box, right? I mean, it's all in our language. So obviously people who are staying in the box and just, doing the routine, they don't get anything special, happening to them. They don't manifest anything that they want. It's always people stepping outside, but in the same, breath, a lot of people step outside and they, last a few years and then they die, or they, get drug addicted, or, bad. So, I mean, but that would make more sense in the theory that it's just experience. So we're coming from the judgment of being in this simulation as things being good and bad, right? As death being bad, as losing wealth, as becoming drug addicted. But in the bigger picture, if we're God experiencing itself, all it wants is different experiences, right? It's not saying I just want the good ones. It's just I want experiences. So everything is, and it is when people tend to step outside the programming that they get, these experiences are created, good or bad.
I get the sense, because this is something we talked about as well, that it makes total sense that the main focus of this whole realm is experience. Yes, that for something wants, whether it's an experiment and they want to see what things happen. If we put this in the experiment, that's one way. I just want experiences, good or bad. It doesn't matter but that seems to be true. There also seems, though, because there's so much robotic behavior, one of the things you wouldn't want from the standpoint of experience is robotic behavior, the complete habitual things over and over and over again to a degree. So it indicates on one level that there must have been a hijacking of the system. the computer must have been, yeah, because we talk about this a lot, that something seems to have, the Gnostics talk about this quite a lot, where there was a creation and then these archons, or this chief archon, got control of the realm and sort of locked it in. So I think we're seeing both of those, which leads back to the more spontaneous we are, the more we're living the way the program was intended, the more robotic we become, the more we are living the way this hijacked thing is
Mm,
wanting us to be. So it's not a sense necessarily of good or bad. It's more just this idea of we need to have experiences and recognize that we shouldn't, label the experience of others good or bad. Just maybe we should just label it robotic or creative. If they're being robotic, that's the only thing of being bad. If you're doing the same thing every day, but if you're at least, even if they're not going well, if you're trying stuff and being different and attempting other things, then you are living the way the program might be originally intended.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, I just had a thought. I mean, maybe, living, going to a job that you hate for 30 years, at the 30-year point, that's an experience in itself, isn't it? Like, you won't be able to feel that destroyed and broken, unless you do it for the whole time. So maybe that's, an experience too, like the whole, that's a whole different sort of look on it, isn't it? It's still valid if we're looking at it as experiences. It's the same as I guess having everything for 30 years or whatever. You need to have it for that time to have a certain experience. So yeah, everything I think is valid. I think that I mean, I think that's definitely what it. We're definitely down here to experience something, but I think that the more we step out and try and create a new experience, the more attention we get. I mean, is that a rule? Can we say attention? The more the matrix has to respond to us in some way, either by trying to pull us back into the system or by trying to whatever, or ultimately by giving us what we want or a new experience that it has to create.
How often have you had these experiences? I'm not sure if I brought this up before, because this idea of multiple me's, having multiple experiences, where you get these elements of bleed, what it's called bleed, where one life bleeds into another. And for me, that seems to happen a lot in my dreams,
Yeah.
where I have a dream of an experience that seems, I wake up from it, and not only did it seem unbelievably real, we get those, but it seems like that really happened. Wait a minute, I actually, that's an experience, and I'm searching my brain when I get up. When I was 25, did that happen? Did I, and I'm no, I don't think it did, but that was an experience. I know I had it.
Yeah.
So is it just our dream tricking us, whatever dreams are, or is this a time of bleed when we've literally cross-connected our consciousness with a different life, and we were seeing a real experience of our life, and that's how we know it is real, but I can't place it in the life I've just had. Have you had those?
Yes, yeah, I had God, back like late last year, early this year. I at one time, I was calling it phasing because it was happening so often, and like literally I could, at one point I felt my energy body shift sideways, and I was like, what? But I woke up one morning and I was walking around, and it was like it was bizarre. I didn't feel like I was asleep or dreaming. It felt like I was in a different place. And literally I was looking, and it's like I kind of knew I was in my house, but what I was seeing was different. It wasn't my house. So it was literally like I'd woken up
Right.
half in two timelines. I was kind of awake in one, but I was seeing another one. And I thought I was, I didn't think I was myself. I was someone different, but I was walking around, and then it kind of, I just kind of, oh, it just kind of, and sort of phased back in, and then it became like a dream, and then I started, like you said, and it was all, I was like, did that happen? Do I know that place? Because it seemed familiar. And I'm like, what? So yeah, that was the most extreme example I've had, but definitely I've had dreams where I wake up and it's like, yeah, was I, did I just relive that? Was that an experience? Or because I don't think it was, but it's so familiar. And like people
Yeah.
in the dream sometimes that you've never met in this life, and it's like, you know, you feel like you're best friends with them or whatever, or know them really well, and it's like to the
Yeah.
point where there's a connection, and you're like, and you get up and you can kind of feel it, but then, you know, it kind of fades, doesn't it, over the first kind of hour, and then like 2 hours later you're like, oh, what was I thinking before? So that's why, I guess, why you got to write
Yeah.
dreams. But so yeah, and that's interesting. I've thought about that.
And something I find about them.
Oh, you
Oh,
go.
sorry.
No, you go. You go.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
I was just going to
Please keep
say,
going.
it made me think about, you know, this whole new Earth, you know, ascension kind of thing that everyone's talking about, and creating something new and different frequencies. Is that what it is? Are we getting the chance to literally step into a different timeline, which is a higher frequency, where, you know, where the life we've lived there has created a higher frequency, and so we're matching it, and we can kind of step across, if you know what I mean. And so in that way, is that what this new Earth is? Because, you know, if we're living all these multiple lives at the same time, and you know, say there is no time, so everything's concurrent, then, you know, you can imagine it like a race, you know,
Yeah.
like a 10,000 live start, you know, do, and then along the way, you know, they're dropping off and dying and that. And so you get to a certain point and, you know, you've got so many left. And then as people are evolving and get a higher vibration, they're sort of going further ahead. And if we can sort of catch up to that, I don't know, do we get to, is it more so it's sort of like a convergence, right? Like, it's, if you could imagine our soul, you know, if you talk about the soul is split into 10,000, you know, splinters, and then as bits die off, they kind of combine back in, and then at the end you've got the one that's done the best and learnt the most, and it's also an amalgamation of all the other ones.
Here's the challenge, right, for what we're talking about, which is this idea of ascension, going further ahead, raising to these higher levels of experiences. Why does the program want that?
Yeah.
You know, we can't, and I'm not saying it's not true, it might be true.
Mm.
And of course, for what we call the new age community, they've really bought into it, generally because it's a nice message, right? So of course they're going to buy into it because it feels good. But then of course it doesn't mean it's not true, but we have to then take that understanding into the experience we have now, or have had our lives. And as we begin to see, wait, it's a simulation, it's a created false reality. Who's created the reality? And then why would they even want this thing known as this raising to a higher dimension? What purpose does that serve the program? Because we're not serving ourselves, it's serving, how does that serve the program? And so far, nobody, at least discussing it, has answered that question enough for me to get on board to say, okay, I believe that's part of what's happening. If somebody can answer that, then I could get on board with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, from the point of view of it's just a simulation for experience, then it doesn't make a lot of, I mean, well, I guess it makes sense in one point that maybe it'll open new experiences up, but it'll also cut a lot off, won't it? So yeah, I mean, if you're thinking, you know, in the terms of like,
and why not have them already? Why not just have it running now? Why
well,
do
that's the thing, because
we
then,
need to
yeah,
do anything here in order to achieve it? If it's all their experience, it should just be happy. It should just be part of the program now.
yeah, so people can, whenever they're ready, can experience it. Exactly, that would make more sense, because then it would get more data more quickly than having this kind of play out as a timeline. Obviously, there's the whole, you know, spiritual aspect, I guess, that, you know, we're here to learn and to grow, and we've reached a certain point, and we're ready for the next level. I mean, that's really, I guess, I mean, that's probably the standard answer, right? That's
And
yeah.
it blows everything up if we start to say, but that may not be true. If there's
Hmm.
nothing for us to learn here, it destroys 90% of the whole spiritual self-help tradition. And it makes us then wonder, well, and then now we become philosophers. Because I think as long as you still think this is a place to learn and some God has made me to get better and improve, I don't think you're a philosopher yet. You're still in the spiritual religious world. You
Hmm.
become a philosopher when you start saying, I don't even think that makes sense. So what the hell is this place? What am I? And does anything I do truly matter? Now you've spun into really dangerous but uplifting territory.
Yeah.
Another book is goes into that a lot, which became a decent movie. That's Night Train to Lisbon. Very well
Oh.
done, and it's all about trying to explain, trying to dig into reality in the midst of a very dark period, which was the fascist control of Portugal in like the 1960s. And again, this dichotomy of difficulty, trauma, living life, beautiful experiences, and no explanation for any of it leads to these deep philosophical questions.
Mm. Well, that's the thing with most of these, they don't lead to anything. All these experiences that people go through, it's like it doesn't really it's like those living multiple lives like you were talking about. In the end, it doesn't really change anything, does it? So it doesn't feel like we're moving as a one sort of thing, one entity getting better and raising our frequencies. I mean, obviously, we can talk about the Archon, coming in and all this kind of stuff, and it being a thing, but I guess we're back into, I mean, is that religion? Because this is the biggest thing, isn't it? It's dropping the
Mm-hmm.
detachment. Yeah, can you hear my cat meowing? She's going off. Um, it's getting detached from all this religion, because this is a thing. Like, if anyone asks the big questions, I mean, that's the go-to, isn't it? Religion or spirituality. There's no, I mean, there's philosophy, but not many people are talking about it, really, are they? So every the way that we whole look at this is completely controlled as well, isn't it? When you say that, it's
Yeah.
like the whole what is life, what is death, it is controlled.
Yeah, it's that whole, and it's part of this thing of like, do you want truth or do you want to get better? And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with improving yourself and because the more you learn within the dream, things will be different. Things will change. You have different options. You have different once you touch the hot stove and you realize that's not a good idea, you don't touch the hot stove anymore. But from the standpoint when we're talking about learning as a soul, as a consciousness, as a whatever, it's the idea like if Jesus is perfect, if Jesus is a perfect created thing by the Father, well, why does he need to be baptized to wash away sin? How could he have sin? He can't. Doesn't make sense. And I think this is part of the question we don't ask. If we are created from an all perfect source, there can't be anything wrong with us. There can't be anything that needs to be fixed on the deepest level. We are already perfect.
Mm.
And in fact, it's our belief that we've gained that we're not perfect, that we have to actually fix our deepest level is the thing that might be the carrot chasing the stick that's got us stuck in here. And
Mm.
once you start to realize none of that is true here, I must already on some level be perfect. Why don't I find out what's true and how to just live perfection rather than try to figure out how to get better?
Mm.
But that destroys, like you say, religion, self-help,
Yeah.
spirituality. It goes down the tubes if you're not trying to find how do I fix myself, as opposed to how do I see myself more clearly and maybe find that I'm already, let's not say perfect, I'm complete. I'm already complete.
Mm. Yeah, well, it goes back to that book that you were talking about, is I mean, that's really what he was doing. That, I mean, that's what it all is, isn't it? You know, if you're after money, it's because you don't think you're good enough without it. If you're after whatever, right? Fame, fortune, you know, all these things. If you need to become someone to be worthy, then who you are to begin with isn't worthy, right? And so in that aspect,
Right.
it goes back to that book. You know, he was doing all this stuff and it just kept on going and going. And then when he sat down, he was like, well, maybe I just need to experience it and not try and get better, because I guess the message there is that we're already perfect. We're just here for the experience, right? So it's, which in that case, it means that it's the program itself, right? That's getting us off,
Yeah.
that off track.
I think once you finally see that this is not, yeah, that this is some sort of a computer experiment, that this is some kind of simulated reality and something has created the simulation, it changes how we interact with it, because the the need to become perfected, or the need to get a whole bunch of stuff to not verify, but to,
Validate.
show how well I'm doing, begins to die off. And then you're left with this space of just, what's the best way to live? And I think that maybe it all just gets down to that. If you boil all the stuff we've talked to in the last hour down to the simple question of, what's the best way for me to live? And maybe it's and there's no right answer. It could be very extravagant, very simplistic, very in nature, very not in nature, but it should be a personal thing for you, that you don't need to live like anyone else. You need to live like you.
You want to live. Yeah. And you just mentioned again that creating that space, which you mentioned before, which I think is a big thing, is, you know, and you can literally visualize it as creating, you know, a space within, you know, all the other program, and that's yours. And it's when we do that and ignore the rest of the program, which is going to go against what I said, you know, those people do tend to have it easier as well, don't they? Probably easier than people who are in the matrix, because people who are in the matrix, they don't normally have, you know, they don't normally go to jail and all this kind of have big things to deal with, but they still have to go to work and all this. So is creating a space, is that starting to create our own program within the program? So, I mean, I have to leave that as a question, because we've gone for an hour. And something else we might need to talk about is how many programs are, well, that's almost the same question, is how many programs are running down here?
Yeah. And again, these are, we don't know, right?
No.
Because we don't know, all of our supposed belief structures and the way we do things and the way, how many things we absorbed when we were 4 years old. Mom or dad or a teacher or something told us something, this is the way things are, and how much of that we've sucked in. And we've, even through all of our philosophical work, there's still underneath the foundation these running belief structures that we don't even know we have, are still boxing us into our possibility. Like, what would happen if we literally got amnesia tomorrow and we forgot everything we've ever known? We don't even know our name. We're starting absolute fresh zero. What would we experience? Because how much of our experience is simply built on what we've been told we're experiencing, what we're told we're supposed to believe and act. And then all of a sudden, if all that's blown out of our system and we're literally instinctual human, I should breathe, I should eat, I should drink some water, I should get outside and go for a walk. Other than that, we have nothing. What would we experience?
It's a good question, isn't it? Because as soon as we wake up, we start thinking, how's the world going to perceive me? What am I going to wear? What am I going to do? All this stuff. It's all sort of based on all this stuff, you know, that we've got, all these preconceived ideas, most of which were implanted by the time we were 5, they tell us. And that's a whole nother question, isn't it? Like why is that part of the program? Is that random? And all that. So Gosh, I think we've raised more questions than we've answered in this one, Howdy. So it's definitely a good leap point though
But they're important.
yeah.
I think if anyone has been following us, the ones who are, we've got a couple thousand people who've been bashing through all of our discussions.
Yeah.
Obviously, because you're having the same questions on some level we are, and maybe this, even though we're not answering things, we're either touching questions that others have had, so you can say, hey, we're having the same questions too, or we're adding a question that you've had question A, and oh, wait a minute, question B, I never thought of that. So as much as this is a conversation for you and I figuring things out, of course, it's a conversation that's trying to help the 2,000 people that are listening to us see if you can figure something out, because maybe our conversation triggers an awareness and understanding for you. Me and Campbell don't get it, but you do.
Yeah, exactly right. So if you got the answer, let us know. But yeah, I've always said, questions are better than answers. They are, because questions start you on a quest. So there we go. So I think yeah, right, the quest.
That should be our next. Let's make sure we keep that. That's going to be the start of our next talk. Questions start you on a quest. We'll be able to talk about the value of questions and what is a quest. Wow, what a great way to start our next talk.
There you go. Let me write that down. Questions start the quest. All right. So there you go.
We talked for an hour just to figure out what we're going to talk about next time.
Just to get the title of next week's talk, the next talk. So yeah, guys, thanks for spending some time with us. We hope we're getting somewhere. Please leave us a comment or like. Obviously, go check out Howdy's work as well. We'll leave the links below. And yeah, any comments, anything, any input. We do go through and have a read of it, so leave it down below. And at some point, I think we'll probably have to collate a bit of those and have a bit of a discussion on some of the comments that we get, because obviously everyone out there watching, it's about everyone, right? Together we can sort of get further than we can. It's not about Howdy and I sitting up here, as the great philosophers. It's definitely a group effort. So yeah, thanks for spending some time with us, guys. Have an amazing day, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with Rules of the Realm. The question, what is it? The quest. The question is the quest. Something like that.
Question start the quest.
Question starts the quest. There we go. All right, guys. Cheers. Talk to you next time. Bye for now.